Fortunately, we have learned that he has contracted COVID-19. We know that nothing is too impossible for God, and as the scriptures tell us, the prayers of the righteous availeth much. So let's keep Rudy Giuliani in our prayers, as we know when prayers go up, blessings come down. Get well soon, Mr. Mayor. Now, without further ado, let me open up our show. Today we have our special host, BB, Trust God 7733, and a special guest, Jeff Dornick, who is the author of the book Church and State, How the Left Used the Church to Conquer America. Welcome, my guest and my co-host, to the show tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
So, Jeff, how are you today?
Great to be here. Thank you.
How are you today, Jeff?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well over here. I mean, I'm keeping busy, podcasting away, I'm here podcasting with you guys. Totally having a blast.
Great. And my special host tonight, BB, how's it going?
It's going well. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be here.
Yes, and as always, at Small Town Andrew.
It's going good. It was going better before the news about the mayor today, but hopefully he's going to be all right with lots of prayers and dinner on, hopefully.
Absolutely. We're going to keep him in our prayers. So, Jeff, let's talk about your book, a rather interesting title. And you and I, we've chatted on Twitter just a little bit. So let me just open it up. Tell us about yourself and about your book.
Yeah, definitely. So I've kind of founded a couple of different organizations and podcast networks and things like that. One's within the Christian realm, which is the Gatekeepers. And again, we deal with politics, culture, society, theology, anything and everything, but it's always from a biblical worldview. So that's what the Gatekeepers. Then I'm the co-founder of Freedom First Network with JD Rucker. We were also the co-founder of the American Conservative Movement, which is essentially our grassroots conservative movement that we're working on building up as well. But this book specifically with Church and State, that's a part of what we're doing over with the Gatekeepers. And what I did here was I brought together a bunch of contributing authors. Everybody's like an expert in their specific field and specifically on what they wrote about and what they talked about. This is a follow-up to our previous book, which was Social Injustice, which took a look at the social justice movement, compared it with the Bible, completely exposed it for being very anti-biblical, anti-God, anti-conservative, anti-Christian. This book is kind of a follow-up to that, but instead of dealing with the ideology, this is more dealing with the strategy of infiltration. And this has been going on for decades. They've been infiltrating into the church, really trying to undermine it, because if they can take away the church is, in all reality, it's the moral compass of our country. And we see the church has been compromised. We see anarchy in the streets. We see abortions happening by the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, every single week. It's absolutely insane. So what we're doing is it's brought together some guys like Pastor Greg Locke, Denise McAllister, Pastor Kerry Gordon, Dr. Michael Brown, a bunch of really great, very well-respected people that really understand what's going on. We take a look at how the seminaries have been compromised, organizations like the Gospel Coalition, where the money's coming from. It's coming from George Soros. It's coming from Paul Singer. Yep. We're seeing the same players trying to infiltrate into the Christian church. So this is more dealing with the strategy of infiltration, and really their ultimate goal is to destroy a country. We all know that we're in a battle, we're in a war, and the thing is, we got to understand that just because this is a political war, it's also infiltrating into the religious side of our country as well.
Right. So why do you think America has become so godless, if I could say that?
I mean, a lot of it is because, we are born with a sin nature. And I think that there is an aspect of that where I kind of blame a lot of our pastors for not actually going out there and speaking truth to society. There's kind of been this pietist movement led by guys like John MacArthur and John Piper and Tim Keller and a lot of the really big names, where they're like, okay, let's not be involved in culture. Let's not be involved in politics. And we just kind of stay out of it. Well, we create this void and this vacuum where then all of a sudden all the progressives and the leftists can come in. And then now you've got the Democrat Party that it's probably the most anti-God, anti-biblical platform ever. Like literally, and again, this is getting a little bit into like the theological side. But when you look at the book of Revelation and you look at the kingdom that the Antichrist is supposed to establish, that's prophesied in the Bible, right? It's literally taking the Democrat platform and establishing it in end times. I mean, at a certain point, you're like, okay, this is legitimately a satanic platform over here. But a lot of why they're getting away with it is there's no pushback from the Christian moral right.
No pushback, but you have a lot of leaders who are out there, like these big box churches that claim, and I want to, like, step into one's feet there, that they're right there for God and they preach these things every Sunday morning. But when you really look at it, it's like, are you really following the teachings, or are you just saying what the people want to hear in order to fill your pockets? And I've heard a lot of people feeling that way. What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the majority of, and again, I don't want to say all, but
Right.
the majority of the mega church pastors, I feel like they've all compromised in order to get there. And again, I've spoken with many of them, spoken with many people behind the scenes. I know how the system works. I mean, you're talking about these mega churches that have budgets of multi-millions of dollars,
Right.
and then you add in teaching ministries with multi-millions of dollars coming. You're talking about these pastors that are millionaires, sometimes approaching billionaires. It's pretty crazy when you start actually taking a look at this. But what's been interesting is when you do follow the money, right? You see guys like George Soros pushing money into the Southern Baptist Convention. All of a sudden now, so I just put out an article, it was either yesterday or the day before, when, I don't know if you guys saw this. Did you see that George Soros announced the new president of the Open Society Foundation?
I saw that on your Twitter feed, yeah.
Yeah, so literally, so for people that aren't familiar with this, he established the president of Open Society is also the chairman of Smartmatic. Small world. Well, here's the interesting thing is the Southern Baptist Convention, which is the largest denomination in our country.
Yep.
They've been coming out very strongly saying that there's no voter fraud. There's no evidence of it. Basically, conservatives need to just give up. Trump lost. Biden won. Let's just accept it and move on. Well, it turns out, if you go back and you follow the money's been coming directly from Open Society to the Southern Baptist Convention. It's verified by Open Society in their actual documentation.
Right.
And so that guy from Smartmatic, he was on the board of Open Society for years. I mean, this is a direct tie with the Southern Baptist Convention, and they were directly providing cover for organizations like Smartmatic, and there's direct financial ties.
Quiet as it's kept. And they're telling us, don't look here, there's nothing to see. What do you say, BB?
Sorry, thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, the Smartmatic, that's very interesting, Ty, because Smartmatic, and correct me if I'm wrong, provides the software for Dominion voting systems, which is the key focal point, if you will, besides the mail-in ballots of the fraud that has been committed. So I think that's very, very critical. But I also want to ask you about, Jeff, about Raphael Warnock, who's running for the Senate in Georgia. He's one of these, I'm Black, by the way, I'm African-American. He reminds me of several African-American or Black pastors who are really hustlers. They're radical. They really don't believe in the message from the Bible. They twist the words of Jesus. I mean, he came from the church of Jeremiah Wright out of Chicago, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremiah Wright is one of his mentors. And he said that you can't be a Christian and serve in the military. So please let me know your thoughts on Raphael Warnock, a candidate for Senate down in Georgia, please.
Yeah, so I'm not as familiar with everything that he teaches, but I have seen a bunch of clips from him, and again, they're, like you're saying, they're very concerning, especially when you're looking at a lot of his influences, people that he's surrounded with, and things like that. There's a lot of like, it seems like liberation theology that's going on, a lot of critical race theory that's going on, and those are both very anti-America, anti-Christian ideologies. And also just the fact that he's basically saying you can't be a Christian and serve your country in the military, or essentially love America. I mean, that to me is one of the most concerning things. And you start diving into this idea of how does this guy get away with this and being involved in politics? And it seems like there's hardly any pushback. Yeah, some conservatives are complaining about it, but how are the Democrats okay with this? Except the fact that it seems like, hey, Democrats hate America too.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really. Go ahead, baby.
I'm sorry. He's a key example to me of the left invading and infiltrating the church. He and a few others. He is one of the key examples. Thanks, Rob. That's it.
Oh yeah, well, and on that note too, I want to say too, there's definitely a very big problem with a lot of these pastors that are on the left that are teaching these kinds of ideologies, especially critical race theory, and a lot of the race issues that seems to be infiltrating into the church, like Black Lives Matter, and a lot of that. We see this with guys like Tabidi, and I can never pronounce his last name, so I'm not even gonna try. But he's one of the head guys over at the Gospel Coalition. Literally, they are bringing in this leftist ideology, blending it in with biblical terms and redefining everything, and then pushing it back out there and trying to act like, well, this is found in the Bible, because they take one little passage out of context and then they look at this and they say, well, clearly this lines up with this, but we got to look at the entire context. What's actually being said? What's actually being taught? And it's what, for me, what's been fascinating is, yes, there's guys like him that to me, they're blatantly heretics, they're blatantly bad guys and blatantly false teachers, right? There's also the extremely dangerous guys where there's the subtle differences, but it's still enough to where you're preaching a false gospel, false Christianity, and you're pushing people away from conservatism. That's where you get guys like Albert Mohler and Tim Keller and Mark Dever and some of these guys that are on big national platforms. Mm-hmm. And there's these subtle differences where they're allowing this leftist ideology to creep in. This guy, it seems like it's just full on fire hose everywhere leftism. Whereas you have these guys that are supposed to be conservative that are tolerating teachings like what this guy is teaching.
Mm-hmm. Well, how do we save America? How do we save America? Does America want to be saved? I just can't believe that so many people are so just lost in all this false teachings that's out there. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, to me, it's shocking how quickly our country's fallen. And so fast. It seems like we were kind of heading in this downward slope during the Obama years, and then Trump came in, and then it's just like we took this nosedive, became extremely polarized, fighting everywhere, anarchy, riots, looting, just insanity, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that what Trump did is he really exposed the deep state. He exposed this leftist ideology. This leftist ideology is not just the Democrats. It's also with the Republicans. It's also with a lot of Christian leaders. And we have to understand that Trump isn't just exposing the Democrats. He's exposing the what I would say the false teachers, the wolves in sheep's clothing within our own midst. Mm-hmm. And that's been happening within Christianity. It's also been happening within the Republican Party. And I think that in all reality is why we're in this, what I would say for the last 4 years, we've been in this civil war of fighting with each other, battling and jockeying for position and control of our country. And I think at a certain point, conservatives have to take a very strong stand. We can no longer tolerate these leftist ideologies, even when it's within our own midst. If it's a Republican, I don't care. We can no longer tolerate it because we've got a country that we've got to save. We've got the truth on our side. We've got the data. We are the party of science. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. We are the party of truth, but we've actually got to be proactive and get the truth out there.
Right. So in your book, what advice are you giving us in your book? What are some of the things that we should be careful of, that we should be watchful of?
Yeah. So within this book, one of the things that one of my recommendations, honestly, is when you're in church, right? I've gotten a lot of emails from people, and they're like, well, how do I know if this kind of leftist ideology is creeping into my church? Because I would say probably, and this is probably a conservative estimate, probably 60 to 75% of churches are now tolerating leftist ideology within their churches. It's a lot. I'm starting to see it in my own church. And it's kind of scary that this kind of a thing is happening in supposedly conservative, biblical Christian churches, right? But what ends up happening, I think, is we have to take a look at who trained your pastor. Mm-hmm. Where did he go to seminary? What books is he reading? Which pastors does he look up to? So for me, one of my biggest advice to people, if you want to understand what your pastor actually believes, he may be giving everything right from the pulpit on Sundays. He may be preaching everything valid and all that kind of stuff. But if he's reading the wrong guys, if he's reading Tim Keller, if he's reading Mark Dever, Al Mohler, Tabidi, John Piper, some of these guys, if he's reading Rick Warren, if he's reading some of these guys, you can begin to be like, okay, so maybe there's a problem here. Maybe there's something that's going to begin to creep in. And then you can kind of keep an eye out for a lot of this kind of stuff, because like in my church, we're starting to deal with, they're starting to have these discussions on white privilege. And we're starting to deal with this kind of a thing. They're starting to talk about racial reparations. They're starting to talk about it's okay to vote Democrat, even though the Democrat Party is pro-abortion, but we can't be single issue voters. We have to be aware of that. They cloud a lot of these ideologies and that sort of thing within biblical language to make it sound good. But you got to be aware for a lot of these buzzwords that are creeping in.
Okay, so if you're at one of these churches, you've been in that church for all your life, and this starts to creep in, what do you recommend? Do you leave, or do you say, I'm just going to take what's for me and leave the rest at the altar or at the table? What do you do?
Well, see, Jesus actually he gives us that answer in Matthew chapter 18. So in Matthew chapter 18, he gives us the steps on how to deal with sin. This ideology, I would declare it's a sin. It's anti-God. It's anti-biblical. So what you would do is you would go. Pull your pastor aside. Hey, can we grab coffee? Can we have a meeting? I'd like to discuss my concerns with you. Because the one thing that I will say, a lot of pastors, they're not actually sinister. They're not actually evil. They're not trying to teach anything false. A lot of them are just naive. They're just repeating what they've been taught by somebody else. So if you can approach them and say, hey, you know what? I have this problem with this teaching that you're given right here, whether it's on social justice, or whether it's on open borders, or whether it's whatever it might be. And you're just like, well, here's what I believe the Bible is teaching. You know, can we kind of talk through this? And don't be confrontational, just talk to them. A lot of times they'd be like, I hadn't even thought about that. Maybe I have to go back and research that, because they don't do anything a lot of times except be within their own church and ministering to their local people. So we got to cut them a little bit of slack. But if they're not repentant, then you bring a friend. And that this is what Jesus taught. If that doesn't work, then you go before the elders. If that doesn't work, that's when it becomes this issue of you either take it to the church or it's time to separate. But you don't jump straight to separating, causing division, whatever it is. You got to go through the steps, but we have to be proactive. You actually have to pursue this. And this could only be like a week-long process. It's not like it has to be dragged out for months on end, but it takes actually taking responsibility for yourself and for your church to protect your church family and approach these guys that are pushing these bad ideologies and saying, hey guys, I've got a concern. Let's take a look at what God's word says and compare this with scripture.
Right. Now, there's something else I want to ask that's really controversial. A lot of people feel that, I'm a Christian and I believe in abortion. What are your thoughts? And not to condemn anyone, but just your thoughts on it.
I'm not afraid of condemning anyone personally, but that's just me. But for me, the one thing that I will say is that I think that there are a lot of Christians who they would say that they're pro-life, but they're okay with voting Democrat. And I would say, okay, that's something that a Christian needs to repent from. It's not anything that a Christian should do. Now, I'm not going to say that you cannot be a Christian and vote Democrat, because I'm not going to judge your salvation. I'm not going to judge your faith in God and things like that. But I will say that's something that you need to change your mind on and you need to repent from. And I'll lay out my reasons why. But when it comes to an actual Christian who's actually pro-abortion, that is flat out heresy. That is flat out anti-biblical, and it flies in the face of everything that is taught in God's word. Everything from protecting the lives of the innocent, everything from actual justice. I mean, the Bible clearly teaches that life begins at conception. So if you're taking life, and that life, it's not like that life has actually done anything to harm anybody. It hasn't sinned yet. It hasn't done anything wrong yet. It doesn't deserve to die. And if you're taking that innocent life, that to me, that's a horrific thing that Christians cannot tolerate. And this has been one of my biggest concerns with, again, I like to throw names out there because people need to be aware of this kind of stuff. When you have guys like Mark Dever, you have guys like Tabiti, have guys that are saying it's okay to vote Democrat. You cannot be a single issue voter. You cannot, they say that you're worshiping being the pro-life movement. And I'm like, guys, I don't know how you can biblically justify voting for the murder of babies. I don't know how you can justify that biblically. You can try to finagle your way around it, figure a way through it, but when push comes to shove, that's what you're voting for when you vote for Democrats.
Wow, you are just like laying it down there. Baby, what do you say?
Oops. I say he's right on. He's absolutely correct. I was a little distracted because I was going to put another comment up, because in Proverbs 6:17, it said, God hates the hands that shed innocent blood. And there is no more blood more innocent in terms of human beings than an unborn child. So, Jeff, you're right on. Thank you.
Yeah, and I've got a really good friend, and I definitely recommend everybody to check him out, Pastor Ken Peters. He's somebody that I work with the American Conservative Movement, and I have him on my show all the time. But he's actually the founder of an organization called the Church at Planned Parenthood, and literally their form of protest is going and having a worship service in front of Planned Parenthoods. It's been really, really cool to see, because they'll have hundreds, sometimes thousands of people showing up, and all they're doing is singing praise songs, and they preach a sermon, and they're holding a church service, and they talk about the issues of being pro-life, and they're actually getting people to be proactive in this fight. I think for a lot of Christians, a lot of times we feel like, okay, how do we actually deal with this? Because we don't want to be Westboro Baptist and yelling and screaming and holding up signs that God hates you and make people feel guilty and all this kind of stuff. Why not have a more positive experience? So these Church at Planned Parenthoods, they've been popping up all over the country. I highly encourage people to check that out, because that's one way that you can actually get involved. And then they raise money, and then they give that money. 100% of the money goes directly to local organizations that are specifically dealing with helping mothers who are willing to keep the baby and not abort the baby. So whether that's help them with adoption, help them with housing, or whatever it might be. So everything that they're doing, everything is trying to funnel money to those good organizations as an alternative to Planned Parenthood.
Right. That's good information. So just going back to just the overall theme of what you're talking about, you have people who they say they're Christians and they're voting for Democrats, and there are a lot of the premises that the Democrats stand for are so against who Christians claim to be. And when you find yourself, at odds with the teachings of the Bible and what is coming from the pulpit, like you said, you go and you speak with your minister. What do you say to God? I mean, because there's a lot of guilt that's there when you go, I want to do what's right, but I hear what my minister is saying. There's this, you're conflicted. What do you do? And I think I started saying this earlier. Do you just walk away? This is a struggle for a lot of people that are out there. They don't believe in a lot of the teachings. I've heard so many people say, hey, I don't like what my pastor, he was doing the right thing, so it seems, and then somewhere along the way, he just completely deviated.
Yeah.
What do you do?
I've never recommend just up and leaving without talking to your pastor first. At the very least, let them know your concerns. Make sure that you're not coming at them angrily or out of anger, but come out of concern. And really just try to get them to come back. Can you explain this to me out of Scripture? But when push comes to shove, right is right and wrong is wrong. We cannot tolerate things long term like this. We can allow a short little season, and we do what we can to try to bring repentance and the pastors that are teaching this, they need to be brought to repentance as well. But the thing is that we can go through the process, but if at a certain point we're not getting anywhere, the pastor's not going to budge, you're probably going to have to either find a new church that actually is teaching the right thing, or what you're going to have to do, maybe you're going to have to start your own church. Maybe you're going to have to start an at-home Bible study, because here's the thing. I think that the future of Christianity is going to be away from the mega churches, is going to be away from the big church organizations, and it's going to be going into the smaller home churches, specifically because I'm out here in communist California. We're not even legally allowed to have church right now. We're in right now, as of today, we're in full on lockdown. Stay-at-home orders. We're not allowed to leave unless it's an essential service. No restaurants, no anything. We're not even allowed to have church services. I have a feeling that we're going to be going towards more of maybe an underground church model. And to me, I would rather get that started now. And also, you can start your church family and actually walk through life together. That's what church is supposed to be.
Okay.
Having 5,000 people show up at church, That's not a church family. You're not walking through life with your pastor. I want to walk through life with my pastor, see him actually exemplify what he's preaching, have him actually speak into my life, not just be an observer watching him do ministry up on a stage.
Right. Now, what are your thoughts? You just touched on, churches that are closed, they're not considered essential. What are your thoughts on that? When you have liquor stores that are open, you can go to strip clubs, but churches, the ungodliness that's in our government today is unbelievable. So, Jeff, what do you say about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, I'm looking at this from two different perspectives. Number one, on the strictly the Christian side of things, these pastors should not be submitting to a government that's commanding us to sin. I mean, the Bible commands us not to forsake the gathering together. So why are we submitting to a government that's telling us to forsake the gathering together? And so, strictly from a Christian theological perspective, I have a serious problem with these pastors that have been shutting down their churches and citing Romans 13 and submitting to government and things along those lines. Which, by the way, with Romans 13, which is the passage that everybody throws out, that Christians are supposed to submit to the government no matter what. The reality of it is, if you go back and you look at Jesus' ministry, Jesus intentionally broke the local laws of Israel by breaking the Sabbath, by not practicing social distance from the lepers intentionally. He intentionally broke local civil laws in order to prove a point. And I think that we're at that point from the Christian perspective. Now, the other way that I look at this is from the constitutional perspective. So there's a couple different ways that we can look at this. Number one is the obvious one, which is our freedom of religion. The government is restricted by the Constitution from providing any restrictions at all to our free worship of our God as we see fit. They are not allowed to tell us how we can worship. So that would include whether or not we gather together on Sundays or for services or whatever that might be. There's also this other constitutional thing called our right to peaceably assemble, which is another constitutional right that is being thrown out the window right now. So just by banning churches, our government out here in California, Governor Gavin Newsom is violating two constitutionally protected rights. So even from a civil perspective, even from a governmental perspective, our government is breaking the law. So why are these Christian pastors submitting to illegal laws? Wouldn't that make them complicit in illegal behavior?
I think it's about money. I hate to say it, but I think a lot of these preachers are ruled by money, and they use the money to tell them, the parishioners, what they want to hear, because they know, hey, the more I tell them what they want to hear, the more money I will get. They have forgotten about God, and they've started running to money.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there, and this is where for me, I would rather see a pastor of a church of 50, 100, 150 people. And then once it starts getting bigger than that, then the church splits off and then you plant another local church. And then that way you have these local pastors that are actually going through life with each other. Because when you begin to see these bigger churches, 500, 1,000, 1,500, 5,000 people, and it keeps getting bigger like that, that's really where you start to see this compromise when it comes to money and power and finance. Because you got to remember, the Christian industry, it's an industry. It's not ministry. It's an industry.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. It comes down to book deals. It comes down to the conference circuit. It even comes down to the worship music. So think about this. And this is something, because I used to be a worship leader, right? One of the interesting things about the worship music that you sing on Sundays that most people don't understand, every single time that you sing a song, that song, you are paying the author or the writer, the songwriter of that song, a royalty. So, for example, one of the biggest worship leaders and songwriters would be like a Chris Tomlin. The guy makes money every single time that you sing one of his songs in church. It's an entire industry. Within the music industry in general, you have two specific groups of musicians that make a lot of money. One is the rap and dance and pop music, because their music is getting played in clubs every single night. Dance music, parties, things like that. The second are worship leaders and songwriters, because every single Sunday, their songs are getting played in churches and they're getting royalties every single week. And so that's the thing that we have to remember. This is an industry. It all comes down to money. people are not doing this out of the love for God and love for people. They're building up these mega churches because of the resources and the finances and the money and the power and the fame. It's the same reason why people get involved in politics a lot of time as well. It's a dirty, corrupt game that I'm trying to do what I can to really expose this for people to see.
Wow. Bibi, what do you say?
Well, I find it very interesting because I think Chris Tomlin, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, he wrote a couple of the mega hits for what is that band? I can't think of the name right now, but I did not know that. Mercy Me.
Mm-hmm.
So wow, that is interesting. But I was also wondering, I think you answered the question I had. Why aren't the churches in California filing a class action lawsuit against Gavin Newsom? I mean, the Supreme Court recently ruled for the Orthodox priests and the rabbis, I have it right, I think, and rabbis in New York and also in California. But where as a whole are the churches? Why aren't they coming together to stand against Gavin Newsom, who seems to be very anti-Christian? He and Cuomo on the East Coast and Newsom on the West Coast, they seem very hostile toward Christianity and Judaism. Am I wrong?
No, you're 100% right there, and it's been really not depressing, but kind of deflating seeing the lack of a spine that a lot of these pastors have. You have guys like Jack Hibbs who's out here. He's taken a really good stand, and I highly recommend people that are following along with this fight against guys like Gavin Newsom. Follow what Jack Hibbs is doing. Jack Hibbs is the pastor at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills out here. He's doing a very good job. Now, the interesting thing with him is he shut down for a short period of time. I think it was until May. And he told Gavin Newsom, okay, I'm going to give you until May. We'll do online services until May 31st. But if you don't open things back up, we're just going back to having church. Mm-hmm. They went back to having church. They've been having church ever since. Gavin Newsom hasn't really done anything about it. I think more people need to realize Gavin Newsom is putting out these illegal supposed laws that I don't think any of these are actually going to hold up if these get challenged, but it takes people to actually challenge them. And that's where I think finally we're getting to the point where businesses are starting to wake up. I don't know if you guys saw there was that saloon owner up in Sherman Oaks that was pointing out the hypocrisy of I think Eric Garcetti up in LA. So for people that aren't familiar with her story, specifically, she made this video that went viral, and she's been holding a protest against these lockdowns. Now, she spent thousands of dollars setting up her outside seating area for her restaurant.
Yeah.
That was deemed illegal. 50 feet away in the same parking lot, a movie studio, which is legally allowed to have to work. Church is not allowed to gather, but a movie studio, they're allowed to film a movie. They had like a kitchen area 3 times the size. That was deemed safe. There's hypocrisy going on here. And same thing, if you're allowing movie studios to film, you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people working on these shoots. Why can't we have church services? There is something specific about the church that these Democrat governors and mayors are scared of because they're trying to shut it down. And I think it's because they know that there's truth there. And when people value God over government, people are more loyal to God as opposed to them. They're trying to get people to see the government as God, not God as God. And I think that that's really what's going on here. There's this spiritual battle of trying to shift people's focus away from God and onto the government.
Unbelievable. Andrew, what do you say? You've been quiet. Do I have Andrew? Andrew, I think his mic is off.
Okay, I'm back. Okay. Sorry, I was on mute. Didn't realize it. But speaking for myself personally, my Pastor Keith, he's a great man. He's conservative, and he kept church open throughout the pandemic. However, I think there's like 7 or 8 people in our congregation that have ended up getting COVID-19. So he's ended up just shutting down until the pandemic is over. So I don't know, Jeff, what would you recommend for people who churches have had to shut down because of pressure from maybe people in the church or whatever, and their normal place of worship is not open? What should they do?
Yeah, well, I think for me, a lot of it comes down to the motivation of why pastors are closing down, right? So if they're closing down because they got or an order from a governor that's illegal, I would say don't shut down, and as a congregation, don't support your pastor shutting down churches. If your pastor is closing down your church simply because of safety, not because they're trying to submit to the government or something along those lines, I have less of a problem with that, of them taking precautions, especially too because there are a lot of churches that maybe they have a more predominantly older group of people. They're more predisposed to having bad reactions to COVID-19. We're supposed to be protecting those people anyway. So I can understand some rationale and some legitimate reasons for closing down churches if you're looking at, okay, how can I best protect my congregation? However, if it's out of Romans 13, we're supposed to submit to the government, that's where I have a problem. So like, for example, in Andrew, in your instance with your church, it sounds like the pastor was taking a stand, was not submitting to these illegal edicts from the local governments and things like that. But then he was making a decision based on the safety because of what was going on specifically within the church. I don't really have a problem with that. For me, it comes down to the principle of who are we submitting to? Are we submitting to God, or are we submitting to government?
Right. Now let's go back to the church families that you were speaking about earlier, creating or developing a church family. How exactly does that work? A lot of people are not too familiar with it.
Yeah, so one of my biggest critiques of the way that church works right now is run like a corporation, right? And so what you have is you have an 18-year-old kid that decides, I want to go into ministry. I want to be a pastor. So then they go to school, they get a degree in a particular Christian ministries, a degree or theological degree, and then they go to seminary for 2 or 3 years. So they've gone to school for 7 years, let's say. They decided at age 18, now they're 25 years old, and now they put out their resume to go get a job at any church that will take them anywhere. They'll go anywhere to take a job. Doesn't that sounds less like church and more like a corporate job? It's kind of weird, right? Whereas when you look at the biblical model in the book of Acts and throughout the epistles, what we actually see is that church was supposed to be a church family. Okay, it wasn't supposed to be an organization. And so what you had is you had mentorship, you had leadership, and then you had pastors that were raising up people behind them, mentoring them, raising them up to where then they would become qualified elders according to the qualifications that are in the Bible. And then from there, then they'd send them out to plant a church or to do something along those lines. I think the thing is right now, what we have churches that will take, a pastor who applied out of Tennessee who's applying at a church in California, then they transplant them over here, and then in 3 or 4 years they get a better job offer to go over to this other church over here who's maybe going to pay them more, better benefits, maybe they're going to get them on a conference circuit or something like that. It's just like corporate America. I think we need to get back to the church is supposed to be a local body of believers, a local body of Christians that are together. They're going through life together. I would love to see a bunch of churches that are 50 people, 100 people, maybe 150 people max. And then from there, if you start getting above that, splinter off, start a second church that's still local. You can still do things together and things like that, but keep it smaller so that way the pastor can actually speak into your life. You're actually walking through life together. That's the way that the early church did it with the Apostle Paul and the disciples and all of that. They were actually going through life being an example to their churches. If you're going to a church with 5,000 people, you don't see your pastor living life on a day-to-day basis. You only see them on Sunday from the stage. And I think that that's something that has really attributed to the failure of the church today, I think.
I'm glad you said that, because I see that all the time with people saying, I want to go into the ministry. And then they go to school and then they come out, they start sending out their resumes. I'm like, why are you sending out your resume? Oh, I'm applying to be a minister at this particular church. I'm like, you know nothing about the parishioners at the church. You're just going to walk in and take over and then assume the duties and say, hey, this is what we're going to do with the church. And like you said, it's almost like a corporation. You see these young kids that are going into these established churches, and that's the reason why they have so much pushback, because they don't have the experience. And then they're coming in what the older parishioners view as these new ideas that we don't want to take on. It's not to say that the ideas aren't good, but you're just walking in, you know nothing about the church, and you're going to set up shop. If there were someone to groom these young people, you go with the church and you groom them to say, these are the things that need to be done. But like you said, we have gotten so far away from that, and it's become a business. People will tell you this is a business. And then they will quote the scripture, well, the Bible says, in business be men. I'm like, but he's not talking about, make the church this corporation whereby you're running money in and money out. If you don't have this amount of money, you're going to tell the parishioners, we need to get more money. It's unbelievable. Whereas the souls of the people and the message of life is completely lost. And that is the reason why we have so many, and they're looking for hope. And they're going to psychologists because they can't go to the pastor because the pastor is too busy looking at the bottom line. And I got to make certain that I open up this church, and then we have the foreign mission, and they have these huge mega churches. And like you said, the only time they see the pastor is on Sunday at a pulpit so many feet away. And then when they need to speak to someone, it's like, okay, go talk to this minister here who has no idea who you are. And it's just a cold feeling.
Yeah, and that's a very good way to put it. And I think that there's another problem too, where the church has, over the last several decades, has shifted its focus away from what God said it should be on to growth, right? So what a lot of these churches have been focusing on is, what the buzzword is like the seeker sensitive movement, right? So what a lot of these churches have been focusing on is attracting the world to come into the church. So attracting non-Christians to want to come to church, and then so they oftentimes they water down their messages and they make it feel very inviting, and then that way you feel like, hey, I could invite my non-Christian friend to church, and they come in, and then it's almost like it's like a hook to get them in, and then you don't actually get in the meat until you go to like a Wednesday night Bible study or a small group or something like that. But the thing is that when you look at Scripture, you look at the Bible, the church is actually supposed to be for Christians. And then it's a place for the pastor to train and equip Christians to then go out into the world to do ministry. So the evangelism, the doing the good works, the service, all that kind of stuff, that's supposed to be done outside of the church. We come together to gather together on Sundays and for church services and dinners and things like that in order to encourage each other, to equip each other, to learn from our pastors, to learn from God's word, so that way we can then go out into the world and do ministry. It seems like what's happened is they flipped everything to where now it's our new form of evangelism is not going out and preaching the gospel to the lost. It's inviting our friends to come to church. And so we're inviting the world into church, which is where now you have everything watered down. The church looks no different than the world. And that's a really big major problem we got going on.
Wow. I mean, I feel like going to church right now. I like that. That's the concept that I like, as opposed to these big churches whereby everything is so cold. You don't know the other person. Every day you go to, every Sunday you get to church, there's a new member who's probably been there for the past 20 years, but this is your first time seeing that person. And then you just become a number. Pay your tithes, pay your offering. You're a number, put you into this committee, but everything else is so cold. And you want a feeling. We're human beings. We want to feel as if though we belong and that we're loved. And I think that if we get back to that, get back to those teachings and get back to the way the church is supposed to be, as opposed to being run like a business, maybe people will come back to God and they'll say, wait a minute, this is what it's all about. And then all this other stuff that we see that's coming up from the left that they're claiming is part of the church, all the secular stuff that has nothing to do with the church, nothing to do with teachings. I mean, I listened to Oprah Winfrey and her Sunday morning shows, and she's trying to extol the virtues of spiritualism and all this other stuff. And I'm thinking, who is this woman? She thinks she's God. It's like, are you serious? And she has a huge following of followers that they look up to her, and she's basically their God. And I'm thinking, no, this is not so. What do you say, BB or Andrew?
Yeah, well said. The celebrity worship has gotten out of control, and just worship of God is what people need to focus on. Jeff, some of our best memories, I'm sure you would agree, and Rob and BB would probably agree also, are going to Sunday school when we were kids, and going to potluck afterwards, and meeting with all the people in the church and everything. You made friends, you learned great values. I'm seeing a lot of people now who are not putting their kids in church, and they just have no understanding of death and so many things.
No.
How important is it, Jeff, that people, if they can, take their kids into a church?
It's vitally important, and especially too with how much leftism and an atheistic ideology that's being crammed down kids' throats today in public schools. There's a reason why a lot of times kids, they graduate from high school, maybe even if they've been going to church their entire life, right? They've been going to church, they go to college, and all of a sudden now they're progressive, they're lefty, they're buying into Marxism and socialism and all this kind of stuff. There's a reason why. It's because they've been brainwashed from practically birth through the public school system. And a lot of times the parents don't even understand or realize what it is that their kids are learning in schools. And I think that, parents, number one, they need to take a more proactive approach in deprogramming their kids if they are sending them to public school. But the other side is make sure that your kids are involved in your local church. Now, make sure that that's a good, solid Bible teaching church. They're not promoting social justice. They're not promoting leftism. They're not promoting all these leftist talking points. But
Right.
It's vitally important that you get your kids involved in Sunday school, in youth ministry, get them involved with your local church. Find your youth pastor, find youth leaders that will speak into your kids' life, that are, again, walking through life with them. That's what's so vitally important. That's really what really worked for me too, was being a part of a really good youth ministry that had really good accountability groups, small groups, Bible teaching. It really kept me grounded when the rest of the world is going crazy, bonkers, and all that kind of stuff, especially today. Today, we have utter insanity in the world that we got to make sure that our youth and the future generations have some sort of grounding in the Bible and in Christianity in order to stay grounded and understand what is actually true.
Yep, I loved Sunday schools. I remember when I was in primary school, we would have a book bus whereby we would leave the school, go to the bus, and they would teach us Bible studies. And they got rid of all that. And I'm like, what happened? Why can't we pray at school? Oh, well, because people pray with different gods. Okay, fine. You pray to your God, I'll pray to my God. But we can bring prayer back to school. I think we need prayer back in school. Someone said that when prayer left, the devil came in. And I believe that, because you look at all the problems that they're having now in schools. Not that they didn't have them years ago, but now it's on a much different level. And people, they don't have the fear of God, and they don't know God. They don't know how to welcome God into their lives. So we see all the problems that we have today. We have children that are so misguided. We were talking about it, I think, in our last show, whereby this kid on HBO, they were having some type of coming out ceremony to say that the kid was a little girl and he was a boy, and he was all of 4 years old. This is the kind of stuff that they're promoting. Thinking, are you serious? You go into the primary schools and they're teaching little boys it's okay to be princesses. I'm like, no, it is not okay. But when you start normalizing this stuff, and they're starting when these kids are young, so that when they grow up, it's like, oh, that's okay. It's not okay. And it's so wrong. And we need to return to God. I mean, our country, we need to return to God. And you see the media and the way they just whenever you mention anything about God, they run around with their hair on fire until they want to use God to say, oh, well, are you praying and are you doing this? But if you ask them, they'll laugh at you. So everything that we're encountering right now, I look at it when they had the president, whom they don't like, when he was praying in the White House. They went bananas. They went bonkers. He doesn't pray. And how does he this? And how does he that? I'm like, are you serious? But let Barack Obama pray? Oh, he's praying. He's a praying man. Although I don't think Barack Obama believes in anything. Have we even seen him at a church lately? No. When he was in the White House, he was always seemingly going to church. But now he says nothing about the church. It's all about him. Obama, Obama, Obama. That being said, I want to pivot just a little bit to talk about current events and things that are happening. I don't know if you guys, I know some of you have stopped watching Fox News, but I tuned on today to a show, Marie Bamarama. I can never pronounce her name correctly, but she had on her show the Director of National Intelligence, Dan Radcliffe. And he was saying some things that I found rather interesting, mainly related to China and how China is trying to take over the world. Of course, they're ungodly. They want to have nothing to do with God. He also spoke about Attorney General Barr, who's supposed to be a devout Christian. And I look at some of the things that he's doing now, and I'm not questioning his Christianity or anything like that, but where exactly is this man with everything that's happening around us? He says that there's no evidence that there's fraud that was committed in the elections. He said that all of like in a week's time. It's like, did he even bother to investigate? He claims that he did. If you he constantly talking about the evidence. Where is the evidence? Thorough investigation. What are your thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that what's been really interesting to me about all of this election fraud is the overwhelming evidence that there is, and yet the left and even the Republicans are saying there's no evidence. Well, it was really interesting. I was on a podcast with my good friend Bobby Lopez, and one of the other guests was Rachel Alexander, who's a former elections attorney in Maricopa County in Arizona. And one of the things that she was saying, looking at the cases that are being put out by Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani and everything, and she's like, I don't understand why everybody's saying that there's no evidence. She's like, they have something like 1,000 affidavits. She's like, normally when we prosecute cases, and she's a former prosecutor, she's like, we have like 1 or 2 that we have to try to figure out, can we corroborate this? She's like, we have 1,000 affidavits of people swearing under threat of perjury, and it's being corroborated by video evidence, by corroborating testimony. It's being verified. She's like, this should be a shoe-in case that should be the easiest thing to prove. But again, as we all know, there's major corruption. And the thing that really bothers me is that I get why the Democrats are doing it. But where are the Republicans? Where is Barr? Where are the supposed good guys? Because out of all the Republicans out there, and maybe you guys could name a few more than that, the only person I've seen actually do anything is Ted Cruz, and even that was very minimal. Mm-hmm. The rest of them, maybe they'll go on Fox News and they talk a little bit about it, but when push comes to shove, they're not actually following through. They're not actually doing anything about this, and this makes me feel like they're in on it or they're okay with it. And that to me is the really scary thing, that these guys that we look up to, these GOP guys, the Republicans, the people that we voted into office to go and represent us, they're turning their backs on us, the American people, by allowing this election to go down as a complete fraud and a complete sham.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said, Jeff. I could not agree with you any more on that point. On this show, Rob and I both know we stuck up for Attorney General Barr for months and months. We defended him when people would come on here and bash him. But I'm not afraid to say that I was wrong. I am super disappointed in Attorney General Barr. His silence and his lack of action has been unforgivable. First, he does nothing about Hunter Biden's laptop and basically ignores it. He stashes the Durham report until after the election, and now who knows if we'll ever see it. And the latest with this election fraud, he's just been silent. Bibi, what have been your thoughts on Attorney General Barr?
Well, I was very disappointed with Attorney General Barr, because how did he determine that there wasn't enough evidence of fraud to overturn the election? Rudy Giuliani said that, based on what I've heard from Rudy Giuliani, the president's attorney, Barr has not asked Rudy Giuliani and his team of lawyers for evidence. So, but stepping back for a moment, how it's not up to Bill Barr to say, well, there's not enough evidence to overturn an election. The fact that there's fraud should be enough for him to go forward, whether it overturns an election or not. If election fraud has been committed, the Department of Justice should be involved. And at this point, with thousands of affidavits, you have mathematicians and statisticians proving to you that there are algorithms within Dominion voting systems. They're not tabulating the votes, they're calculating the votes. That should be enough to pique the interest of the Department of Justice.
But
because Dr. Shiva is correct. If you voted for President Trump at 0.7, If you voted for former Vice President Biden, it equaled 1.33. Their Dominion fractionalized the vote, and that goes against the equal protection clause under the Constitution. It's simply not right.
No.
There's plenty of evidence of fraud. Thank you.
Absolutely, I agree wholeheartedly. And like I said, listening to the DNI Radcliffe today, and the statements that he was making that this does warrant an investigation. I think just looking back at some of the other things that he has said and has done, Barr came in like a hurricane. He came in with all of this pompous, and he was going to do this, he was going to do that. And yes, he did, set the record straight about the whole Russia collusion, but that wasn't his only job. There were a lot of other things that he was doing now. So is he just biding his time all to wrap up, then he'll walk away? Yes, he said, okay, Durham, I'm going to be a special prosecutor. But we all know that Biden can at any moment say, okay, I'm going to get rid of it. And do not doubt that they will do that. They will end Durham's term. They will get a new attorney general, and that attorney general will say, we don't need him, bye. And what will the Republicans do? They'll roll over. Now, of course, when the tables were turned, they kept saying, oh no, you can't get rid of Mueller. You can't do it. You can't do it. Oh, heaven and earth will pass away. It's a constitutional crisis. But do you think for a minute that if Biden is successful in stealing the election, and he appoints a new attorney general, and they start to put pressure on him to get rid of Durham, he will get rid of Durham, and Republicans will say absolutely nothing. They might keep up a little stink, but then it will fade away. And I can see Ben Sass and Mitt Romney saying, oh, so be it, it's over, let's move on. Because they don't care. They want those days, the olden days, before Trump to come back, where they could all waddle in the swamp and get fat, book deals, all kinds of lobbyists coming in, whining and dining them. And they sit back and say, okay, this is it, nothing else. But this has to stop. It has to. Because to me, this is a constitutional crisis. It is a constitutional crisis, knowing that China has been trying to bribe a lot of the senators and representatives on the Hill. And this is reported by Dan Radcliffe. And the media has no curiosity to go and look at this. None whatsoever. It's like nothing to see here. But when it comes to China, Joe Biden, softball questions, oh, he broke his toe, oh no. And look at the stories that we got from Joe Biden. First, he was running with his dog, and he tripped and he stumbled. Then the next thing we know, oh no, he was in the shower, and he got out of the shower with no clothes on, completely nude, chasing his dog, pulling his dog's tail. Joe loves to pull tails.
Isn't that animal abuse?
Well, hey, Joe Biden did it, so we're not supposed to say anything. This is ridiculous. And we're sitting here, 80 million Trump supporters, and they're telling us you can't do anything about it. You better shut up and you better listen and you better accept Joe Biden as a president. And just one last point. I don't know if you guys saw Chris Wallace today on his show. I didn't see it. I saw some of the clips whereby he was forcing one of his guests to say that Joe Biden is the president-elect. One of the cabinet members, Ezar, said, well, the vice president, he goes, no, he's the president-elect. He's the president-elect. Chris Wallace is so compromised, completely compromised. I have no faith in the media, none whatsoever. I'm now watching Newsmax or One American News because these other guys, they are completely fake. Now, I know Fox, they're doing their best now to try to run during the day the night programmings of Tucker Carlson, Hannity, Sean Hannity, and Laura Ingraham. But it's too late. And my advice to the president is leave Twitter immediately and let them suffer. Let them tank. Just leave Twitter. Now, if he were to do it, he goes to Parler. Parler would probably break down because they don't have the capacity that they need for all of his followers. But something has got to change because what's happening right now, I don't like it. What do you guys say?
No, I'm totally in agreement with you. The thing is that we got to understand about the Chinese Communist Party. Yes, they've been buying off senators, and again, that goes Democrat and Republican. This is not just a Democrat problem. This is a politician problem, and there's a serious problem with the establishment Republicans, where they've been giving lip service to supporting Trump over the last 4 years because they look at the polls and they saw that Trump had a 95% approval rating with Republicans, so they knew that they had to support him. But when push comes to shove, they're totally silent. When it comes to all this election fraud, they're not going to step up. They're not going to defend him. They're not going to do anything. Why? Because they're all paid off too. On top of that, the media is all owned by China as well, either directly or indirectly, whether it's advertising, whether it's partial ownership, whether it's investments. The mainstream media, they're all controlled by China as well. That's why they're never going to investigate any of this kind of stuff, because they would be going against their own bosses and biting the hand that feeds them. Same thing when it comes to the entertainment industry. Same thing even when you start dealing with what's going on in the education system. Everything is getting funneled in from communist China. And we got to understand, this is a national security thing. And the thing is that if Joe Biden and the Democrats get complete control over our government, and this is what I've been saying, I don't see any coming back through standard procedures, right? If the Democrats get control, what they've already said, they're going to make it to where they're going to make the 10 to 30 million illegal immigrants legal. That's 10 to 30 million votes that are going to go Democrat. I don't know how you overcome that. On top of that, they want to lower the voting age to 16. On top of that, they want to make felons to be able to have the right to vote. On top of that, they want to make Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, and the Samoan Island states. That's 2 more senators for each one and multiple more representatives. Again, all going Democrat. There's no coming back from that. And then on top of that, then you throw on their actual platform. What are they going to try to accomplish? It's going to be things like taking away our Second Amendment, implementing hate speech laws, contact tracing. What do you think they're going to do when COVID-19 is done with those 100,000 people that Joe Biden's going to hire to stalk us and track us and see whose house we're going to and all that kind of stuff? I mean, like literally, they're going to systematically destroy our country, take away all of our constitutional rights. And this is where it's incumbent upon us, the American people, to hold our Republican elected officials' feet to the fire, because this is the fight. There is no next time. It's either now or never. We have to make sure that we have a legitimate election. If we wait, there is no 2024. We're done. We've got to make sure we get this one right.
I agree. Baby, what do you say?
I wholeheartedly agree. You know, people say, well, President Trump can run 2024. Listen, we have to get this right. I mean, there has been cheating for God knows how long, and it's been mostly done by Democrats. The difference here, it's so obvious. Why was Dominion accepted in Georgia but rejected in Texas, which did due diligence? And Dominion is owned by foreigners, if you will, with the servers in Germany. There's too much going on here. And why were in some areas, urban areas, they were able to cure or correct the ballots, but in other areas they weren't. I mean, the illegal ballots, people in Georgia under 18 voting, which is illegal. I mean, just a mess. We have to get this right. We're not a banana republic, because our right to vote was paid for in blood by my ancestors and the American soldier who is serving now and who served in 1776.
Yeah.
We have got to do this right, because if we fail here, they will say, aha, we have a way to keep cheating. We can do this. Yeah. And there will not be a Republican president for a long time to come if they get away with this.
Right. They will keep cheating and cheating and cheating. We have to get this right now.
Yeah.
As simple as that. We can't just like, oh no, let's just look the other way. No, we have to get it right. And as Jeff was saying, I mean, you look at the agenda that the Democrats want to put on us. I mean, they've already saying that you can't go to church. I think that they will probably ban church completely. Just get rid of it. They don't like church. They don't like religion. It'll be the religion of Oprah Winfrey, as far as they're concerned. But this is just the beginning. They start out really slow, taking away your rights so that you don't know about it. And then the next thing you know, they've taken away everything. They're now trying to push the legalization of marijuana. Now you think about it. You keep people high, while you take away their constitutional rights, they'll think nothing of it because they're high. So we'll just take away everything. And the moment you wake up, you have absolutely nothing. Keep them inside, keep them high. We can do whatever we want to do. We're the elitist class, and we will go around and we'll enjoy ourselves, whereby we're telling them, stay inside. This is for you, stay inside. Andrew, what do you say?
Yeah, well said. It seems like a lot of these rhino Republicans are just going to be happy to go back to the way things were before President Trump came onto the scene. It looks like they want to go back to taking money from China and go back to their corrupt ways. As Jeff mentioned earlier, I'm not happy with the fight that the GOP is putting up on President Trump's behalf as of now.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And we patriots must stay we must stay the cause. We must stay forward, stay focused. Because if we don't, these rhinos will just roll here less. They want Trump just to concede, wrap it up, so that they can move on and continue to get money from all these lobbyists and have the lobbyists wine and dine them. And this shouldn't be that way. This is our government. It's we the people, not we the media. And the media could care less, along with big tech and what they're doing. So I would venture to say that if we don't prevail in Georgia, look out. It's not going to be pretty at all. Yeah. It is not going to be pretty.
Yeah, well, you know, and I think going along with what you were just saying too, I think an important distinction here is I think that we as conservatives, we need to understand why Republicans don't like Trump. Because the thing is that in all reality, it's not like Trump is this crazy far right conservative. He's a pretty pragmatic, moderate politician, like when it comes to his positions, and he's just a very pro-America, you know, America first president, right? Which is awesome, which is what we needed. But the thing is that we got to understand is that the way that the Democrats and Republicans used to work back in the day before Trump was that the whole point was to not actually get anything done. So think about it. This is an example that I always use. When it comes to illegal immigration, Democrats and Republicans have been fighting about this for decades, got nowhere. Why? They intentionally would only propose things that they could not actually do or pull off or get passed, specifically because they needed that controversy in order to get reelected and to campaign and to raise money and point at the other side and say, look how evil they are. They're keeping us from accomplishing this. And then they go back to DC and they don't actually accomplish anything. Well, here comes Trump, this outsider, this businessman who's not a politician, who doesn't play the game. And he comes in and he's like, hey, yeah, you know, you guys have been fighting about this thing for a while. I'll fix it by building a wall. How about that? Problem solved. It's done. Right. And that's where Republicans hate him just as much as Democrats, because he's taking away their income. He's taking away their power. He's taking away their ability to get reelected, because people are realizing, wow, we can actually get things done if we elect the right people. That's why they hate him. Now, the thing is, it's going to be a surprise to them that if Joe Biden does get in, they think that they're going to go back to business as usual. It's not going to be business as usual, because Democrats are going to control everything, and they're going to hijack everything and just ramrod everything down everybody's throats and literally destroy the country. Now, Republicans that are buying into this, they either, number one, are completely naive, or number two, they're in on it too, along with this coup. I don't see any other way around this. But the thing is that in all reality is why they hate Trump so much, is because he's taken away their ability to get reelected and taken away their ability to raise money.
Right. This is Trump's party, and he should hold on to it. I mean, a lot of them want him out so that they can wrestle it away from him. I know that one in particular, Mitt Romney, Ben Sasse, and even Marco Rubio. I mean, he has eyes on running in 2024. I wouldn't vote for him. So I think the president should stay the course. He should continue to have his rallies. And if, by chance, Joe is successful in stealing this thing from Trump during the inauguration, Trump should have his own little rally to say, hey, I'm going to run in 2024. And a lot of the media, they are fearful that he is going to do just that. What do you say, BB, in our closing minutes?
Sorry, guys. Sorry. You're absolutely right. I mean, you know, if Joe Biden manages to pull off this stolen election, Trump will be a major figure. He will continue to be a major figure. And I think he would be successful in 2024. But right now, we got to get this right. And
Yes.
I would agree with Trump if he did not show up for the inauguration, because Trump, the fact that that they recorded 74 million votes for Trump, with all the shenanigans and throwing away the ballots and all that, that tells me probably close to 80 million or more people voted for Trump. It's a miracle 74 million were recorded. He defied all, the statistics on this. In the last 60 years, a candidate who won Florida and Ohio won the presidency.
Mm-hmm.
He got more votes than any incumbent president. He got 11 more now than he did in 2016, and he still lost. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. And all the irregularities, the fraud, all the mistakes, all of that went Joe Biden's way without any deviations, without Mickey Mouse on the ballot, Elvis Presley, third-party candidate, Trump. It all went to Joe Biden. That is statistically impossible.
And that's the reason why
we know it.
And that's the reason why a lot of people are having a difficult time believing that Joe won. I mean, again, I go back to 2016 when they said that President Trump was an illegitimate president. And a lot of them said that. I have the tapes. They said he was an illegitimate president. And to say that about Joe Biden, it's as if though you just swore at your mom. You look at the media, they will attack you viciously. Oh, no, you're wrong. Accept this. It's like, but you guys didn't accept it. And the only thing, we're being nice about it. Trump is being nice. He's saying, I want to look at this. If Joe is so serious about bringing the country together, why don't he say, okay, then let's just look at the votes. Don't certify the votes now, but let's look and make certain that the votes that were counted were the accurate votes. If he's so certain of his win, why is he afraid to do that? I mean, look at what happened with Trump. They kept pushing weak Jeff Sessions, and he said, okay, special counsel. We're not saying a special counsel. We're just saying, let's just look at the votes. Let's count the real votes, not count the old votes that you've been counting. Let's count the legitimate votes. But they don't want that. They want us to accept it as if though 2016 and what they did never took place. It is unfortunate. So in our closing minutes, does anyone have anything else to add? We want to thank definitely Jeff Dornick for being on with us tonight. You have valuable information that you gave us. I would definitely recommend that everyone goes out and get your book. Where can they buy your book, Jeff?
Yeah, if you guys go to gatekeepersonline.com, go to our store there. You can get Church and State. Use code Jeff at checkout. You'll get 10% off. We also have a combo pack for Church and State in our previous book that we have, Social Injustice. So you can get both books for $40. Again, you can use code Jeff. You'll get a discount on that as well. But it'll really help you to understand what the heck's actually going on, specifically when it comes to the morality, the infiltration. And again, even if you're not a Christian, it'll still help you to understand the strategy of how they're trying to take down our country. So I really appreciate you guys having me on too.
Oh, well, glad. And you said you have your own podcast?
Yeah, so I've got like what I don't even know how many podcasts I've got right now. So every single morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time, I've got my morning show, Let's Talk Right Now, and this is just me ranting and raving about whatever the heck's going on in the news. So that's every single morning, and it's a two-way conversation. So everybody post your comments, all that kind of stuff. It's a fun way to kind of go back and forth. Mondays and Thursdays at 3 p.m. Pacific time, I've got my show Freedom One-on-One, and this is my political interview show. So I've had everybody on from like Burgess Owens to Joy Villa, Aubrey Huff, Jerry Wayne. Just a bunch of awesome guys there. Then I've also got my Wednesday show, which is my Christian interview show called Conversations with Jeff. That's Wednesdays at 3. Fridays at 3, I've got the Gatekeepers podcast, which is my Christian ranting and raving show. And then I'm also co-hosting the Mindy Thomas show. And that's a new show we've got on Freedom First Network with Mindy Thomas. She's a former journalist. She was actually had the first post-trial interview with O.J. Simpson back in the day. And so she's been bringing on some really good guests. So we've interviewed Kevin Sorbo already, Kevin Von Erich, who's a WWE Hall of Famer, and then actually this
I know him.
Yeah, he's a fun interview, I gotta say. And then this last week we just had on Jeremy London, who that was an interesting conversation specifically because he has major Trump derangement syndrome, major. So we were talking to him, and I could see his shoulders tensing up. He was like pressing his hands on his eyes, like getting frustrated. But it was a fun conversation. But it's definitely been fun. But again, I don't know how I still have a voice doing all these shows, but it's fun.
Yeah, Jeff, sounds like you're quite the busy guy. We might have to try and get that Kevin Von Erich hookup sometime. Yeah. But yeah, fantastic show tonight. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us. Be sure to check out Jeff and all of his podcasts. Going back to one thing Rob mentioned, that the House legalized marijuana. Don't think that the left just wants to give us more rights. I'm not necessarily one of these people that's against legalizing marijuana. I think people can do what they want to do. But in states like Washington and other states where they've had marijuana legalized for a while, we've already seen them try and pass bills where they use it to where people can't buy a gun if they have a history of purchasing marijuana. So basically, they want to legalize that to take away our other rights. So never think that they're trying to do us a favor and give us rights, because that's not in the Democrats' agenda. But thank you so much, everyone. Great talk with Jeff. And
thank you.
Oh, and Bibi, also Bibi, where can we you and Barbara from Harlem? Please give a plug for that.
Thank you. Well, she's on Facebook, and it's Barbara from Harlem. Facebook has been censoring us, so we may go to Restream like you're doing and feed it to Facebook and YouTube. So I'll have more information the next time I'm on, once we straighten this out. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Excellent.
Andrew, anything else?
Nope. Just be sure to follow us all on Twitter. Rob's got it on the screen right now, and we will see you guys Tuesday night at 10 Eastern, 9 Central, and make sure you check out BB's podcast and Jeff's shows.
Yes, and remember to keep our Mayor Rudy Giuliani in our prayers. Thank you, good night, and God bless.
Thank you.